award-winning journalist with more than 3 decades of experience writing about the Tampa Bay region. She's a member of Leadership Florida and the Athena Society and serves on boards of Awesome Tampa Bay, Arts Council of Hillsborough County, and Power Stories. A graduate of the University of Minnesota with a BA in journalism, Diane won the top statewide award for editorial writing from the Florida Society of Newspaper Editors while at the Tampa Tribune, and received special recognition by the Tampa Bay Association of Black Journalists for creative work as content director at WUSF Public Broadcasting. Past accomplishments and community service include leadership positions with Alpha House of Tampa Bay, Florida Kinship Center, AIA Tampa Bay, and the Greater Tampa Bay Chamber of Commerce.
Sort of your background, and I'm thinking as I'm listening to that, like, how do you relate those sorts of experiences into the entrepreneurial world that we live in Tampa Bay today?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of lessons that you can learn in the military and as an entrepreneur. I think one of the things that if you look at any type of success as an entrepreneur, or just in most things in business, it's all about solving problems. And I think the question is often more important than the answer. So like the last story I talked about, the question about, how do we continue this exercise? The problem is we don't have the money to do it. And I'm a big proponent of not spending a lot of money. In fact, my biggest entrepreneurial failure was a business that I raised $50 million for. So that, raising too much money is a bad thing. When you are resource constrained, it causes you to think creatively that can permeate your business and the competitiveness of your business, because you're basically having to outwit your competitors and deliver success with less resources. So when you do have more resources, you can probably do a lot more.
And we'll get back to that biggest failure later.
Yeah.
But I wanted to explore a little bit more about some of the strategy that you and I had shared earlier that you learned in the military, and you had referred to it as OODA.
OODA,
and
right.
I could hear OODA every time you were talking about one of these stories.
Yeah.
Do you want to share what that is?
Sure.
And how that applied both in that military experience and in the entrepreneurial?
Does anybody know what OODA means? OODA, O-O-D-A. So OODA is an acronym that I will never forget. It was drilled into you in flight school, and all pilots know, military pilots know what OODA is. And I think OODA has such applicability towards entrepreneurial career. What it stands for is observe, orient, decide, and act. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs end up with the A first, or D and A, they decide then act. But most of the businesses that I've started, I'll spend probably a year observing and orienting. So with, for example, with televisions, there was a specific problem, and I can talk to you about that later, that I started with, but I literally spent a year going to trade shows, looking at technology, building software, looking at different things without ever actually taking a step or making a decision to decide to get into this business. And so I think that process, there's a lot of impatience because you don't have money, especially if you don't have a job. People will tend to go into business too early. So I'd recommend keeping a job as long as possible and really doing your homework, observing and orienting before you decide and act.
And in televisions, what was that initial problem that you had observed?
All right. So I think one of the reasons televisions worked was because the problem I had was very specific. And I think going back, when you say problem, I hear when people say, I ask people, what's the problem? And they say, oh, well, I think the problem is students don't leave high school with enough education. I mean, that's not a problem. That's something that's ethereal. But the problem that I had, that I solved in televisions, was had to do with the phone system. So when I had started an internet startup back in the 90s, I ended up making that decision when I had probably 10 or 12 employees. I said, I'm going to buy a phone system. And back then in the 90s, it was like $70,000. And it's like your biggest capital purchase, but you can't, we were playing sneakernet. So I couldn't decide whether I was going to buy a card that would allow me to go to 24 ports, or I don't remember, maybe a 12-port card. Well, anyways, I said, let me just go ahead and get a 12-port card because that's all I need right now. But what I didn't realize is the business model is that second card on a phone system was as expensive as the entire system. So my phone system I didn't replace it, I bought a second card to give us 24 ports so I could have 24 phones. And then literally 6 months later, I was out of that. And so now I was buying this new phone system, and I had to go through that entire process again. And then I bought one with 48 because I said I can't imagine it being more than 48. And then within 6 months of that, my company merged with another company, and theirs was a surviving phone system. So I spent all this money on a phone system that I really never used. And when I read about IP phones and how you could do that, I said, boy, wouldn't that be great if I could get all this as a service. So as far as I know, we were the very first company that started a everything as a service model. So we would include phones, switches, and routers, as well as the entire service, all for one low monthly fee. And we were responsible for everything. And you could throw a phone against a wall and send it back to us, and we would replace it. So that business model of basically saying, look, the problem that me as an entrepreneur was I'm always messing around with my phone system, trying to help grow my business. Wouldn't it be great if a company just took that whole thing off and gave me one low monthly fee? So I knew that problem intimately, and so I created a business to solve that very problem for entrepreneurs.
So you observed the problem.
Yeah, firsthand.
Firsthand, you
Yeah.
oriented yourself as to what the solution might be.
Right, now that took a year.
And that took a year of time. And then what was the process to get from the problem to the solution?
Well, so the first thing you had to do is with limited capital, you have to say, all right, we're going to give away phones. We need capital to have that equipment. And fortunately, the partner I started with had a high-level relationship at Cisco. So we went and pitched the Cisco executives on a cloud-based phone system. We didn't call it cloud. This was in 2005. And they were like, this is crazy. We're not going to do this. But they basically said, all right, we'll as long as we can be able to take this equipment back, they'll go ahead. And they gave us initially a $250,000 line of credit. So that was, just to try this out. I mean, this was an experiment for them, and because no one had ever given away everything. There was other vendors that you could plug it into the internet, but it didn't work very well. The other thing we did is through that experimental process, is we powered it up. The phones on the internet in 2005, it sounded like Snap, Crackle, Pop, and most business people wouldn't use it. So we realized we had to become a traditional phone company to be able to deliver an end-to-end service that was of very high quality. And we ended up charging a little bit more than our competitors that did it over the public internet. But as a result, we were able to select companies that were the cream of the crop, that could pay their bills, that would pay a little extra for that quality, which was a good byproduct. And then, we got that business off the ground. It didn't work so well. We ended up having to do a pivot, which I can explain later. But
Well, go ahead. What do you mean by that? Yeah, the pivot.
So
we're not talking basketball.
Yeah. Does everybody know what a pivot is in an entrepreneurial business? All right. So we got fortunate, and this is again luck meets opportunity. I had a friend of mine that moved here. He was actually a West Point classmate of mine. He took over Cott Beverage Corporation. You guys know that, and they're a big public company, and they needed a phone system. So I was, he said, about phones. He calls me up, and this was in 2007 timeframe, and the business was really struggling then because we were still trying to get all the technology working right, and the one problem we had is we tended to service customers. A number of our customers were ones that couldn't afford a phone system, so they were thinly capitalized businesses, and then we had probably maybe 1 or 2% per month would go out of business, and then we'd have to go collect the equipment. So that was a hard business model to do, but we were able to prove this in a large company, COT. We deployed this, and they were in this middle of negotiations, and they had one of their offices, which was here. They had this old phone system, was on its last leg, and it went out on them, completely kaput. It was going to cost them like $70,000 to fix all the hard drives. And the guy, so my friend calls me up and says, "Hey, can you do this?" And I said, "Great." And we literally put an entire phone system in overnight for them, and they couldn't believe it. I mean, the IT department was, pretty impressed. And so that gave us the credibility to deploy this. And what ended up happening, and if you guys remember in 2008, what was going on in the world, we were all going to hell in a handbasket. And a lot of our businesses were going out of business and couldn't afford the bills. They were delaying their payments. We were running out of cash flow. And I noticed, hey, these big businesses, if you could, we proved this out in one business, and I took our best 2 sales people and I said, all right, what we're going to do is we're going to totally focus on big businesses. And that's all I want you to do is go after some bigger companies. And so we did that, and we really paved the way for mid-market. Our average customer size in 2008, our average customer bill was about $550. By 2011, we were $2,300 per customer. So you can see how we literally would fire all these customers. If you didn't pay, on the real small side, we were like, we recommend you go to some of these other competitors. But that, I think, really changed the business because we had this customer base that a lot of companies started wanting. And Bright House, they are, and I don't know if you just saw, they announced their enterprise division here in the last couple of weeks, but they want to target enterprise customers. And we had a bunch of customers that because Bright House didn't sell through resellers their network. And so we built all our customers on, Verizon and Windstream and stuff like that. And so they ended up buying our company and then using our channel program to now sell their network and then move all their competitors onto our network and they have a much larger customer base because they had been focusing on smaller businesses.